Welcome back to Recommended Daily Dose. I'm your host, Dr. Clenton Coleman, along with my man,
esteemed colleague, Dr. Suraj Saggar. And we have a very special guest today.
She's a special guest. She has a cool name, Miss Nino Royalle.
Not Nino Brown.
You.
It's way better than Saggar's, what's your name? Suraj Saggar?
Brown Sugar was my nickname.
Who named their child that?
It's my nickname in college. Come on. My mama named me that.
Well, Mrs. Royalle is a lifestyle blogger and certified holistic health coach. She's also a creative entrepreneur. But most importantly, she's a spokesperson for familial hypercholesterolemia. So welcome to the show.
Oh, so we have a lot to talk about today. Lots to talk about today.
So you wear a lot of hats. How did you get to be a holistic health coach?
I have a funny story. I actually did go to medical school, believe it or not.
Oh, you did?
I did, yes. I went for a semester, and then I left after my first semester because I wasn't happy.
Which we all were probably at some point. But you were smart enough to just
She was actually smart enough to leave.
Yeah.
No, but you were smart enough to realize maybe it wasn't your passion, right? It wasn't your true calling.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I love science. I do. And obviously, I worked very hard to get to where I got to. But once I was in that environment, I didn't feel like that's what I wanted to do for the rest of my life because I started to get anxiety when I would think about being in the library for like the next 10 years or...
Tried 30 years.
Like,
but,
yeah.
How old are you?
I'm
when
basically
you're like at his age. Okay. Yes. You didn't want to be him when you grew up.
Let's not interrupt our guest.
Sorry.
Well, like
please.
I love to be outdoors and things like that. And so when I started to think about like, what do I really want to do? I'm really in love with like nutrition, and I'm very, very into holistic health and nutrition. And so when I thought of myself actually being a doctor, I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to handle that, where you're, in a cubicle 24/7 trying to figure out what's wrong with patients.
Right.
So I really wanted to focus more on preventive stuff as opposed to treating the patients after it's already too late. And that's not to take away from what doctors do. I think it's incredible what you guys do. I just feel like there's also stuff that a lot of patients can do prior to getting to the point when they come to see you and it's like too late sometimes.
So we talk about in our show all the time. So I suspect you're alluding to the whole idea of preventative medicine, preventative measures, right?
Yes.
So, and I think you have a lot of interesting experiences early on in your life that maybe shaped your thinking. Tell us about that.
Well, I mean, I lost my dad when I was 10. I actually watched the entire thing happen. He basically died in front of my eyes. He had an instant heart attack.
At a very young age, is that right?
Yeah, he was 35 years old.
Wow.
So very young. It basically was just a very traumatic incident that happened to our entire family.
Right,
my dad was this larger-than-life person. The whole neighborhood knew him, so it was just very taken aback. No one knew that there was something wrong with him even. And actually, 2 months after he passed away, we found a letter saying he needed immediate surgery. No one knew about it, not even my mom. He never told anyone.
And was there some underlying, I suspect there's some underlying condition that perhaps he had, right?
Yeah, he had high cholesterol. And so my mom said, like, once I got older, she told us that, he would go to see the doctor and they knew that he had high cholesterol and all of that stuff.
Right.
They gave him a couple of different medications, but the medications never seemed to work because his levels were around 700.
Wow.
Yeah.
So let's give people perspective. So normal total cholesterol is around 200, right?
Right.
And then you have the bad cholesterol, which is the LDL. So usually around 100. So his total cholesterol was 700.
His total cholesterol was 700. And that's what they said, that his cholesterol was around 700 when he passed.
And to put in that perspective, there are people, and I'm very interested because I have high cholesterol, called dyslipidemia in my family, but we're talking cholesterol levels in the high 200s. So when you're talking about 700, 600, 700 plus,
it's a whole different
that's
animal.
a whole host of entities called familial hypercholesterolemia, and there's different types about that. But so I suspect that you, your sister, or your other siblings got tested. Is that right?
Yeah. So after he passed, we got tested. Like the entire family got tested.
Sure.
And it came back that me and my sister both had high cholesterol. So when I was 10, my total cholesterol was around 410. For kids, it was 150 is the norm.
Correct.
So it was like times double or times triple almost. So immediately, obviously, my mom was just, going through a lot of stress at the time, and we started seeing a lot of specialists. My sister was 7, and she was also diagnosed with high cholesterol. Hers was around 380 something total.
And did you find the pediatricians that time? You're talking maybe early 2000s, I'm assuming?
This was in 2002.
Right. So did you find that a lot of pediatricians or other healthcare professionals were knowledgeable about this?
No.
They were not?
They were not, no. During when it happened, a lot of the doctors that we would go to didn't really see many cases like this, especially in kids, right? Everyone is used to treating older patients that have high cholesterol and trying to figure out why they have it and telling them to switch their diet or putting them on medication. Whereas here you have these 2 kids that, we weren't obese or anything either. We're living a normal life, eating
normal diet,
homemade meals, everything, yes.
Well, even your dad, you wouldn't have bothered to check. That wasn't the thing to check cholesterol on 20, 30-year-olds.
Right,
especially with no obvious risk factors. Like you said, they're not obese. But that's the whole idea, And the reason I find this fascinating is because, I try to stay in shape. Dr. Coleman tries to emulate me in the way that he tries to emulate.
Round, square, what are we talking about?
He tries to emulate the way I eat, and the way I look and dress. Also, I think I notice you're dressing better. But as
you have the taco meat, Sean, show the taco meat.
Take it easy.
Take a look, taco meat.
But in all seriousness, I tell patients, and we both tell patients that lifestyle can only take you far. Genetics is a big part of it. So something like familial hypercholesterolemia, it's very difficult to overcome, and you don't necessarily have the outward look of someone, let's say, who's obese or who has the history of eating fatty foods, high cholesterol foods, things like that, right? So it's very important to bring awareness to this entity, which does exist amongst families.
Mm-hmm. And I think also when we found out what we had, one of the things that was interesting was that high cholesterol is very different from familial hypercholesterolemia,
exactly. Right.
which was a whole nother world to try and understand, because when we started to see all the specialists, oftentimes they would get a group of people to try and conspire and see okay, well, what's actually going on with these kids? Maybe they just have high cholesterol. Maybe it's something they're going to grow out of.
Right.
Until time passes, and guess what? You're still feeling the same exact way. And when we found an endocrinologist, he kind of specialized. He worked with kids on this stuff. This was around the time when Lipitor first came out. And there was a lot of studies done on Lipitor in adults and what the dosages needed to be.
But conversely, not much in kids.
No, exactly. Right. And so he was willing to take the risk to prescribe us Lipitor at really, really small dosages to see what would happen.
I suspect at that time, very few people would be prone to prescribing Lipitor or any statin drug to children, right? So,
well, yeah, because there was no research.
There was no
research done on it. So how could they? And it's they're taking that risk based on just their own research that they've been doing, which is something that I think why we really stuck with that doctor for many years, because he took the time to research and constantly educate himself, and I think that's what makes a great doctor. Even something what you guys are doing with the podcast, even spreading awareness, constantly bringing more attention to a lot of these things that many people are dealing with that's not out there. So yeah, I appreciate
I find that some are great in others, but I think you're doing a good job.
Thanks. So how did that change? So as a 10-year-old starting Lipitor, how did that change as far as, and growing up, did that change your, I'm sure, your lifestyle, your 100%. Eating habits, all that? How did that relate to the family? Because now I find it hard to counsel patients, especially who have deep cultures, who are really food dependent on changing their diet and their lifestyle. So that probably must have been a big challenge to you.
Oh, 100%. And it's funny that you ask me that, because the way that changed our entire life, not even just my life, but my entire family's, because I come from a very heavy Russian Georgian family,
so
which means that
lots of meats,
lots of cheeses, lots of bread. I mean, that's what I grew up on.
Right.
Not in excess, but
it's a typical diet, right?
It's a typical diet
carbs as well, right?
Exactly,
so
lots of carbs,
like that,
everything. So when we were diagnosed with the FH, my mom was obviously in a very, very much in a shock phase, and we found a nutritionist, or I think she was either a nutritionist or a dietitian, that specialized working with kids, and so she put us on a very strict diet. And this was also the low-fat craze of like our society, right? When it's like, if you have high cholesterol, you eat low-fat.
Low-fat, right.
So, and that was supposed to be the solution to everything. In our case, that was supposed to be, okay, we're going to regulate as much as we can of the cholesterol with the low-fat diet, and then whatever else we can't get rid of, we're going to use the medication to take care of that. So literally every single thing in our household became low fat. Everything, low fat milk, like Cheerios.
But how do you get the insight at such a young age? I feel like at that, I mean, it's one thing to be an adult and set in your ways, but at least you have the insider knowledge to know, hey, I have to do this, you know, or I'm not. So was it because of what you experienced, unfortunately, with your father that said, hey,
I had no choice. My mom was very strict, like very strict. We packed our lunches every single day. I mean, to the point where, so half a serving of a banana is one serving. I'm sorry, half of a banana is one serving.
Right.
So my mom would make us split the banana because we could only have 3 servings of fruit. Like it was that intense. Like no food after 6 or 7 p.m. We would also take flaxseed meal, put it into water before nighttime, drink that. I mean, everything and anything that we could do, we did that. And it was very strict. And I would say that all throughout junior high school up until I got to high school. So in junior high school, I felt very isolated because of that.
So you can't hang out with friends, going to parties, ordering pizza.
Well, I could hang out with friends.
But a lot of it revolves around food and other things, right? Eating junk food and things like that.
I cried on my 11th birthday because I couldn't have pizza. Even though I begged my mom and I was like, please, just one.
My 11-year-old almost cried, but I think it was he didn't get the Xbox game he wanted. So you're dealing with much more life and death type of things.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, I was also in a very confused state at that time because I just lost my dad. I didn't know what was going on. And then all of a sudden you're walking into these clinics that I'm not used to being in like all the time. And they would bring in residents. Now I know that term. But before that, when I was 10 years old, I'm just like, why are there 5 people
so
with
you're
coats coming in?
So you're going to teaching institutions, and I mean, to be honest, that's what we call it, a fascinating case, and a rare fascinating case, right? So.
And that's what they would say. It's like, is it okay if we bring in a couple of other residents?
Med students, interns, residents, the whole thing.
Yeah, right. And my mom would say yes, but I didn't know what was happening. I mean, there was also one time where in junior high school, they made me wear like a whole box, and then had a bunch of wires that were hooked up to me because it was a heart test that they were doing.
Like a Holter monitor.
Yes, I guess.
Yeah.
So basically looking at your heart rhythm, and we prescribe this to patients as outpatients to say, are there any, we call it arrhythmias or abnormalities?
Yes. And I had to wear it for like 24 hours, but I had to go to school because I had to do my regular day-to-day
routine
thing.
And see how your heart responds to going to school, to stress of whatever.
Exactly.
Sure.
But now imagine wearing that in junior high school.
When already it's an awkward.
And I'm
talking
like,
about
am I
awkward,
supposed to go to school with this? I was like, are people going to notice it? Like, then I was trying to hide it that I was wearing it. So I wore like a bulky sweater. But also, I was in dance talent in junior high school.
So dancing with a Holter monitor.
I think I actually sat out, to be honest, that day because I was embarrassed.
I think America's Got Talent, you could have, done something like the whole
dancing
with a Holter monitor and a bulky sweater.
Right? That would have been awesome.
You did something like that, I think, right, in junior high?
Jazzercise?
You did jazz? No, but you did some kind of ballet. You used to do ballet, I think.
Ballet, yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
and you used to
wear
like...
No, I didn't do ballet.
No, I thought you did.
Can we curse? Can we curse?
We're going to find some pictures. He used to wear like a bulky sweater with like the leggings, but we'll take it.